He turned around and saw me. The audiobook ended. Daniel pulled one earbud from his ear and laughed at how tense he had become. The room was empty. The closet door was closed. Rain tapped softly against the window. He reached for his phone to play something else. But before his hand touched the screen, both earbuds made the familiar connection sound. The phone was completely off. Then the narrator spoke again. "Interesting. You actually turned around." Daniel froze. Most people stop listening before this part. The voice fell silent. 15 minutes earlier, none of this had happened. Listening to horror stories before bed was Daniel's nightly habit. That evening, he found a recording he had never downloaded. It had no cover image, no author's name, and no reviews. Only one line appeared beneath the title. Length, 15 minutes. Curious, he pressed play. The narrator greeted him in a calm voice. "This story has only one listener." Daniel smiled, settled into bed, and closed his eyes, believing it was nothing more than another scary audiobook. The story described a man lying alone in a quiet apartment on a rainy night. Daniel barely noticed the similarities until the narrator suddenly stopped speaking. After a few seconds of silence, one word broke the darkness. "Daniel." His eyes opened immediately. He replayed the last minute, expecting a mistake. Once again, the narrator paused and quietly repeated his name before continuing the story, as though nothing unusual had happened. The narrator calmly described dark blue curtains, a glass of water beside the bed, and a scratch on the bedroom door. Daniel slowly looked around. Every detail matched his apartment perfectly. Feeling uneasy, he paused the recording and searched every room. Nobody was there. He returned to bed, pressed play again, and the narrator softly said, "Daniel has just checked the apartment. He found exactly what I expected him to find." Daniel searched for the audiobook online. Nothing appeared. No website, no reviews, no publisher. It was as if the recording had never existed. When he opened the app again, the narrator was already speaking. "You won't find me there." Daniel's fingers froze above the screen. He had searched only seconds earlier. The recording had answered a question he had never spoken aloud. Trying to stay calm, Daniel walked into the kitchen for water. The narrator continued, "He's pretending this doesn't scare him." Daniel stopped moving. In 3 seconds, he'll look toward the living room window. He didn't want to. He fought the urge. Then, without realizing it, his eyes drifted toward the glass. "Exactly," the narrator whispered. "You always do." Daniel pulled both earbuds out. Silence. He exhaled in relief. Then the voice returned anyway. It wasn't coming through the earbuds anymore. It sounded as though someone was quietly speaking from the hallway outside his bedroom. "Taking them out changes nothing," the narrator said. "You've been listening long enough." He grabbed his jacket and headed for the front door. His hand touched the lock. "Don't leave," the narrator warned. Daniel unlocked it anyway and opened the door. The hallway lights were on, but something felt wrong. The corridor looked longer than before, stretching far beyond where the elevator should have been. At the other end, a dark figure stood perfectly still. Before Daniel could focus on it, the lights flickered and the hallway was empty again. He slammed the door shut and locked it. His heart pounded as he called his friend Mark. The phone connected immediately. "Mark?" Only breathing answered. Slow, calm, patient. Then the narrator spoke through the call. "Nobody can hear you while the story is playing." The line disconnected. Seconds later, Mark texted him. "Everything okay?" "You never called." Daniel looked back at the audiobook. The timer no longer showed minutes. Instead, a new message appeared across the screen. Listener status: active. Beneath it, another line slowly faded into view. Next listener will begin after the current one finishes. Daniel stared at the words in disbelief. Then the narrator quietly laughed. Don't worry, you're almost at the ending. Daniel held the power button until the phone shut down completely. The screen went black. The apartment became silent for 1 second. Then the narrator returned, clearer than ever. Turning off the phone only ends the recording. It doesn't end the story. Daniel slowly stepped away from the bed. The voice no longer seemed to come from one direction. It surrounded him as though every wall in the apartment had learned how to whisper. He hurried into the bathroom and splashed cold water across his face. When he looked into the mirror, he almost screamed. A tall figure stood behind him in the reflection, too dark to recognize, perfectly motionless. Daniel spun around. The bathroom was empty. He looked back into the mirror. The figure was gone. The narrator calmly continued, "Mirrors never lie. They only see a few seconds ahead." The lights flickered once, then twice. The apartment fell into darkness. Daniel reached for his phone, but it was still switched off. A single emergency light from the street illuminated the room through the curtains. In that pale glow, he noticed something that had not been there before. Wet footprints began at the front door and ended beside his bed. There were no footprints leading back out. A slow knock echoed from the bedroom wall. One knock, then another, then a third. The narrator counted with each sound. 1, 2, 3. Daniel held his breath. Another knock came from inside the apartment, closer than before. "He's looking at the wall," the narrator whispered. "In a moment he'll realize the sound isn't coming through it." The knocking stopped. Complete silence filled the room. Then the narrator spoke more softly than ever before. "Don't turn around." Daniel's muscles locked. Something warm brushed across the back of his neck, like the breath of someone standing only inches behind him. The voice waited several seconds before speaking again. Every listener reaches this moment. Almost everyone makes the same mistake. Daniel squeezed his eyes shut and refused to move. Every instinct told him to look behind him. But the warning repeated in his mind. Don't turn around. The apartment remained completely still. No footsteps. No breathing. Only the narrator. "Good," the voice said. "You're lasting longer than the others." Then a new sound broke the silence. It came from the bedroom. His phone, which had been powered off, began vibrating across the floor. The screen lit by itself. There was no incoming call, no notification. Only a black screen with a single white sentence slowly appearing letter by letter. "It is standing where you were just looking." Daniel forced himself not to turn around. Another sentence appeared. "It moves only when you try to prove it isn't there." His hands shook so badly that the phone slipped onto the floor. The narrator sighed. "You still think this is an audiobook?" The voice sounded almost disappointed. "It isn't. It's a record." Daniel frowned. "Every person who listened before you added another chapter. Their fear wrote the story. Their ending became part of it. Yours will too." The screen changed one final time. Previous listeners, 327. Current listener, Daniel. Next chapter, writing. A smile spread across the narrator's voice. "Now you understand why the story always lasts 15 minutes. It ends the moment someone turns around." The room grew unnaturally cold. Daniel could feel something standing directly behind him, close enough that if he took one step backward, he would touch it. He clenched his fists and stared straight ahead, refusing to move. The narrator spoke one last sentence. "If you never turn around, you'll never know what was behind you. But if you do, Someone else will hear this story tomorrow. The recording ended. The apartment became silent. Daniel stood motionless for what felt like hours before daylight finally crept through the curtains. He had survived the night without looking back. Then his phone vibrated. The screen was still black, but one message appeared in white letters. "Thank you, Daniel. The next listener has just pressed play."